In our first poster, we're going to work with the basic gradient tool in Illustrator, and we're going to also see the possibilities of using the appearance panel. But before we start working on it, we're going to see some examples of the effects we can achieve with the tools we'll be using with our poster number 1. I've prepared a board in Pinterest, whose link you'll find in the additional material, in which I gathered several images of graphics made with gradients. This board has 2 goals. On one side, it will serve you as inspiration and see the possibilities gradients have to offer. And on the other, for you to start learning what kinds of things you can do with each tool we're going to see. And this way, you end up having a clear idea of how you'd resolve a specific design. To ease the task, I have divided the board in subboards according to the techniques you can use to reproduce them. So let's take a look at the subboard number 1, where we'll find examples that could be done by simply using the basic gradient tools and the appearance panel, thanks to which we can overlay gradients. Despite it being a very simple tool, you can see you can get some colorful designs. This one, for example, would be done by applying different color gradients to the different sides drawn. And this one, we could do it by adding 2 borders from the appearance panel and applying the same gradient to each border, but with different angles. And just by using these 2 tools, we have loads of possibilities. Now that we've seen this, let's get down to work and start with our poster number 1. All the posters we'll be making during the course will be made using this template I made and that you'll be able to find in the additional resources. The size of the document I chose is the one Illustrator suggests in the poster option when creating a new document. The color space I'll be using is RGB, since the purpose of the project will be web. I have also prepared my workspace, and in the swatches panel, I have included the colors I'll be using. I previously chose these colors following the criteria we saw in previous lessons. This first color matches with the default text color in the template. I'm going to be using this folder up here for the background, and I'll use this one down here for the glass I'll draw. Before starting with the poster design, I'm going to open the Layers tab and hide the Template tab so it doesn't bother me. I'm going to create a new layer, which is the one I'm going to be working on, and I'm going to put it below so the template will stay on top. So once we've done this, we can start with the design. The first thing we're going to do is prepare the background. In order to do this, we're going to define a gradient in the Gradients panel, which is the one I'm going to be using as a base. These 2 colors are the ones I'll use. I'm going to add it to the swatches panel just in case in the future I want to use it so it's easier. With the shortcut M, I'm going to select the rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a rectangle whose size will be the size of the artwork. In order to set a good workflow, I would advise you to work as much as possible using the keyboard shortcuts. If you don't know them, I recommend you to learn them little by little, and you'll realize that when you start fluently using them, you'll work faster. In the additional resources, I'll leave you with a link containing the keyboard shortcuts in Illustrator as well as in Photoshop, so you can refer to them if you need to. In order to create this poster, we're going to use the basic gradient tool, which is the one right here and whose keyboard shortcut is G. You probably already know the basic gradient tool, but for those who don't, we'll make a brief summary. When we press the gradient tool on an element, this bar automatically shows up on the object. This bar is just the representation of this other one in the gradient panel. So if we hover the mouse over it, we'll find that in the corners there's the colors with which we created the gradient, and up here the mix handle. So if we modify something here, it automatically does so in the gradient panel. We're going to even add colors or move the colors we already have, and all of these will automatically change in the gradient panel. Another thing we can do is change its position, its size, or rotate it. We'll use the round end to move it and the square one to modify the size or rotate it. We can also redraw it as many times as we'd like, left-clicking and dragging the mouse. This is quite useful because we can redraw the gradient as many times as we like until we're satisfied with the results. Another of the basics of this poster will be the use of the appearance panel, which is a big ally when working with gradients, because thanks to it, we'll be able to add complexity without adding more objects. The appearance panel will let us add more fillings or borders to the same element, so they overlap with the ones already added. If we want to add a fill, we just click the fill icon and our object will have a fill on top of the other. If we define a white gradient with variable opacity from 100 to 0 on this new fill, and I change the gradient type from linear to radial, I'll be able to set a shine around the top of the poster. And besides, I can change the opacity to this shine or even the blending mode. Using the same tool, I can add another reflection with this purple color. And I can keep adding whatever I want until I'm happy with the results. Alright, now that we have the background ready, it's time to go on to the main motif. But before, we'll lock the background so we don't modify it accidentally whenever we're working on it. We're going to do so by using Ctrl 2 or Command 2 from a Mac. As a main motif to get the most out of our gradient, I'm going to draw a polygonal glass. I'm going to use the pen tool and I'm just going to draw shapes connected to one another. I'm drawing it randomly, not caring if I like the shape, because then with the direct selection tool I can select the corners and rearrange them as I like. Now that I've finished drawing it, I'll apply a gradient I'll create with this list. I will set it from a 100% opacity to 0. As you see with this opacity option, I've managed for it to get through the background in some zones, and that gives me a very interesting sense of glass reflection. I'm also going to remove the stroke. For these three elements on the back, I'm going to apply a different gradient. I'm going to do taking this darker blue. Using different tones will help me create the illusion that the light is coming more from one side than the other. Now it's time to tweak the gradients to my taste. We'll do this by selecting them one by one and using the gradient tool, whose keyboard shortcut is G, we'll be adjusting them until they look like we want. In this case, what I'm going to try is to leave the dark part in the bottom so it looks like the light is coming from the top. To finish, in those parts I want it to look like it has more light, what I'll do is overlay a second white gradient from the appearance panel. Alright, so now my glass would be finished. I'm going to get everything and I'll group it using Ctrl G or Command G if you're using Mac, so I can move it around at my taste and make it the size I want. I want to give the lot a finish with a bit of grain, so I'm going to navigate to the Layers menu. I'm going to select the layer where the poster is, and in the Appearance panel, I'm going to put some grain on it. Okay, we're finished. I'm going to lock it so it doesn't bother me, and I'm going to edit the template. We now have our first poster ready, and in the next lesson we'll make our second poster, in which we'll see how to add a gradient to a group.